Hey guys, John Scarborough here. I got a duck house I'm working on. As y'all saw before, we have some ducks. If the videos will post the way I want them to. Sometimes on YouTube they don't always post the way I want them to. But anyway, or sometimes I'll forget and post the wrong one before I post the other one. But anyway, we got some ducks and we're planning on putting them on the pond, and we're considering making this into a floating house. We'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to do that, and I'll show another video once it's all done. But I just kind of wanted to show a video here kind of showing what we've done so far. It'd be a little bit easier to see, I think, before we get all the way into it. But as you can see, we were able to use just scrap tin. These were actually sheets of tin that somebody had thrown away, where they were going to throw away. And so I had asked them, could I have them? And I took them and laid them in a pile somewhere. And they're just shorter pieces like this that only work. Most likely they came from a spot like this in a barn where someone had them straight up and down, just like a little small wall off of a lean-to or something. So unless you were doing just that, you wouldn't be able to do it. And there was only like, I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe 8 or 9 of them. And so there wasn't really enough to even do very much of a wall. So this is really a good place to use stuff like that, scrap like this. And then we used a makeshift trim and used it as our ridge cap. But what we did here to try to make it as cheap as we could, I actually took, this is a 1/2-inch metal electrical conduit. I'll see if I can kind of show you in the back there. You can see where we bent them, and I'll probably put a few pictures how we did it. But anyway, so you can see that we actually bent them across and just made and it's just one piece. It was one full 10-foot piece. I actually didn't plan on going this tall with it, but a 10-foot piece worked out perfect for that height. So rather than trying to do anything else, I just did that. And so back when I got these, of course I got these for a lot cheaper because somebody had a big old pile of them and I just made a little trade for them. But back then, these 1/2-inch conduits were really, really cheap. So now they're actually quite a bit more. And I would use these as electrical conduit, but a lot of them in the pile have little rust spots in them, rust holes, and the galvanization is starting to rust off of them. So I wouldn't want to use that for that anymore. It's not that you can't, but I just wouldn't want to. So this is a good place for these kinds of things. And so I use this 1/2-inch conduit for quite a bit of different things when I'm trying to do something real cheap and easy and light. And that's part of it, is it's light, but still somewhat structurally sound. So I'm going to try to demonstrate. I'm not going to be able to actually fully demonstrate it, but I'll kind of show what I do to be able to do this. And when you do that, you're able to pretty much build anything you want, putting those bends into the pipe like that. And so I'll walk over here and I'll show you real quick, kind of show you at least what we do. You can see I got everything messed up here. I'm trying to work, but essentially this is my 1/2-inch conduit, and I'll just measure where I want and put me just a little mark, a dot, anything, nothing fancy. And then I'll try to do this with one hand, and then I'll pick it up and I'll take it over here to my anvil. And no, you don't need an anvil to do this, but this is what I do. And I put wherever my mark is, like let's say there's a mark right there. I put it up against that, nice and firm, and hold it. And then I take my hammer there and give it a couple whacks on the back side of it. And what that does is it flattens it a little here, a nice flat side, but then it divots this side. And so that causes you to be able to bend it right where you need it. So there's 2 ways, once you get that bend in there, that you can stiffen that up. And one is you could put a little weld on the inside on both sides, but you have to be a pretty decent welder or at least have a MIG gun to do that without popping holes in that thin metal. So another really good way for that is to lay it flat. I lay it flat on the anvil, but all you need is a hard surface, and I'll tell you how to do it without an anvil here in a second. But then you lay it flat to where where you put your divot in right here. You pick it up and lay it to where your divot's still pointing out. And then you give it a couple whacks, not too hard, on both sides. And that crimps it together, and that makes that bend a lot more rigid. Now, before you make that bend rigid, you want to make sure you pick it up if you got several bends in it, and do some tweaks in it and make sure it's tweaked and straight how you want it. And then you hit it and make it more rigid. If you are interested, I'll try to get another video out. I'll have to make sure my wife's here so she can video me doing it. But I'll try to get a decent video if you are interested. That's a really handy, it makes this stuff really useful. And even though it's expensive, more expensive now than it is, I would still argue that it's still a cheaper route for a lot of different things that you can do. I've made roll-ups for my temporary electric fence wire. All of my reels. I've made several different things with this for significantly cheaper than I would have. So I think it's a valuable option for sure, and something maybe you could put in your arsenal and keep around. So if you are interested in that, put it in the comments. Let me know, and I'll definitely try to get a video out on how I'm doing that, how I'm making these bends. Other than that, I hope I've described it as well as I can while trying to keep this video from being too terribly long. So anyway, I'm going to come back. I'm going to do another video, maybe more than one, and show you all some more of what I've done. But you can see here, and I made a hole here, and then I decided I didn't want it there. But all I did was, after I did it, I drilled holes in each side, and they had to be two different size holes because you've got this is bigger here, and then you can tell that's crimped down so that your conduit will actually slide together. So it's two different size holes, but I just used butterfly bits and just dropped them in the hole, and that kind of gave it a little bit of rigidity. We're not like perfectly solid this way, but as soon as we get our walls on the front and back, that will stiffen it up, and it's completely solid the other way. A lot of people don't realize it, but when you get tin, all buildings are wobbly until after you get them all screwed together. And then once you get all those screws in there, it significantly stiffens that up. So another thing we will probably do, we wouldn't necessarily have to, is we'll probably put some sort of a support across here, at least in the middle. The tin on the outside, I think, will hold it together because it's running sideways. And incidentally, I'll say it real quick, I'm not a big fan of running tin sideways on an actual building. But for something like this, that it makes it easy and it's not a huge deal, then yes, go for it. Do whatever you need to do. But running it sideways across this back will actually help stiffen it up even more across this side. Not that it would necessarily need it. But anyway, so I may put another one in here. And being a welder, most likely I would just flatten both ends, stick it right in there, and do a couple of tacks on it. But another good way to do it, and I may do it this way just to kind of show other people how they can do it, is to flatten your ends and then bend it on the end of your piece of pipe. And I'm talking about a cross member that would be coming across here. Put a bend in it, a 90-degree bend where your pipe's here and then it 90s down, and flatten that. And then I would just run a screw through that. That would work very well. And like I said, I may actually just do that for simplicity reasons, or just simply to help show y'all what I'm talking about. So anyway, we'll see how that works. Seeing as how I am a welder, I may just go ahead and weld it, just because a lot of times for me it is so much easier just to pull out a weld machine and throw a little weld on there. But it does require a little bit of skill when you're working with a thinner galvanized metal. Otherwise, you'll blow a hole right through it. But anyway, I will talk more about this. The treated wood on the bottom they're actually fence pickets. I find they're the 6-foot fence pickets. I have found that those 6-foot fence pickets have not gone up in price yet from what they used to be, and they're fairly reasonable priced. Not when you're trying to build a fence, obviously. When you build a full-fledged fence, they're going to add up quick. But when you're just wanting something to throw across and build here, they seem to be a fairly cheap option. They're still under $2 a piece. So when you're talking about strips of treated wood, it's not a bad price for building something like that. Let me see, I think I got 7 there, so that's 7, and then those 2 other smaller pieces. Those are about half pieces there. So you could say I've got about $16 in that. And then these other pieces of 2x4, they were scrap pieces I had laying around. And so one thing I could have done, if I would have had to go buy the 2x4s, what I would have done instead is go and buy PVC pipe, and probably 1.5 inch PVC, and fasten everything together with PVC. I would have still used the planks in the bottom, but then I would have used PVC around the bottom, around there. And you could even use PVC here as well. And you could make it round instead of like that. That was just what was easy for me. But if you did the plastic PVC all the way around, you could do round stuff. And the nice thing about the PVC, and like I said, I had considered doing that option. The nice thing about it is that it will actually, it's going to last. You know, it's not ever going to rot out. Even treated lumber eventually will rot out, especially if I make this a floating house. But anyway, all of this was already here. I didn't have to go to town. It was cheap to me because I already had it back before all of this inflation, and most of it was repurposed or just old material anyway. So really, so far, the actual money that I got into it is really only about $16. But that's just for me, and that's not including my fasteners, you know, and things like that. But anyway, so I was just going to throw that out there. I hope y'all like that video. I'm planning on putting another video once I get it all the way done. The 5-gallon bucket is what I'm considering using as my nest. If anybody knows a lot about ducks and they know whether or not ducks, like I know that you can put ducks in a floating house, and I know that you can somewhat convince ducks to lay in nest, lay their eggs in a nest. But what I cannot find online is a question I've been wondering about is, can you get ducks to lay eggs in a floating house? I know that, anyway, so if anybody knows that, the answer to that, if they've ever tried it, put that in the comments and let me know, because I feel like I have a theory that if you could get them to where they've got a nice floating house that's really safe and everything, and then you create an environment that's closer to what they're used to, I feel like they would be more likely to lay their eggs in that house. So that's one reason for using the 5-gallon bucket is a lot of times ducks in the wild, they like their nest to be more almost burrowed up around them. So I don't know. I'm going to give that a shot and see if that's something that will appeal to them. Maybe they'll like it. Maybe they won't. I don't know. But anyway, we're going to give it a shot. As you can see, this is just an old bucket for tractor hydraulic fluid. Obviously, you want to make sure all that oil is washed out, the residue of that. But, you know, every now and then you need some tractor hydraulic fluid. So that's just what I got. But you can go to Lowe's and buy buckets and things like that as well. They've gotten expensive too, is what's crazy. But anyway, yeah, definitely keep an eye out for my other videos on that, and we'll see what ends up working. So, and let me know if anybody has ever tried anything with floating houses and what they've done, and whether or not they've ever had their ducks actually start to lay eggs in there, whether that works, whether you like it, any of that stuff. So thanks everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe.